Good morning everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is an update on data protection and FOI. My name is Karen Devon. I'm the events producer at the SFHA, and I'm excited to be hosting this morning's session. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, who is Mark Chynoweth from RGDP. Mark provides the management level interface between RGDP and its customers. He manages the data protection officers who deliver their services, and he's also the DPO for a number of RSLs. Before I hand over to Mark, I have a few bits of housekeeping. A recording of today's webinar will be available on our website after the session, and we will send you all the link. If you have any questions for Mark, you can ask them using the question tab. It's at the top right of your screen, and it looks like a little dialogue bubble with a question mark. Mark will take questions at the end of the session, but you can ask those throughout the session. So without any further ado, I would like to hand you over to Mark and enjoy the session. Thank you. Mark, just to let you know, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can indeed.
Perfect. Right, good morning, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay whilst I found the mute button. As Karen said, I'm Mark Chynoweth and I'm the General Manager of RGDP. A little bit of background about RGDP just to sort of set the scene. We've been a commercial associate of the SFHA for just over a year. RGDP was formed in 2018 to provide DPO services to organisations that wanted to outsource their data protection requirements, largely in the light of GDPR and the new Data Protection Act, which was introduced that year. In 2019, we expanded our services to include freedom of information and environmental information regulations advice. And at the same time, we also agreed a preferential rate for our services for SFHA members. We're now the ICO registered DPO for about 30 RSLs across Scotland, as well as a range of other charities and private sector organisations. Our principal limited liability partner is BTO Solicitors, and our office in Edinburgh is co-located with BTO's data protection team. So we have access to a legal second opinion whenever we need it. And our other limited liability partner is a company called Computer Law Training, which specialises in data protection training advice. So my purpose today is to update you on the latest ICO and Scottish Information Commissioner guidance in the light of COVID-19, and to give you some tips and advice on the data protection aspects of home working. In terms of context, we've now been working from home for over 2 weeks. We've seen a number of minor breaches, nothing out of the normal, to be honest, mainly simple errors, emails going to the wrong addresses, and we're also seeing some freedom of information requests and subject access requests still coming in. We're conducting our DPO visits and our advice remotely by telephone or video link, and that's highlighted some of the distractions of home working, interestingly, sometimes involving children, pets, and even other halves and partners. We seem to be set to work from home for a while yet, and already quite a few people are saying that it's setting a precedent for increased home working in the future once this crisis is over. So any lessons that can be learned now, I think, are likely to prove valuable for the future. The webinar is going to be a bit of a whiz through, but the slides are going to be made available to you, and there will be some time for questions at the end. So here are the regulators. These are the people that enforce the rules and the people whose spotlight that we want to avoid coming under if we possibly can. First of all, the Information Commissioner's Office, the UK Supervisory Authority for Data Protection, Freedom of Information and Environmental Information Regulations. The ICO has a small office in Edinburgh, which is excellent for advice, but the main casework, for example, when you report a breach, or if somebody makes a complaint, their investigations are dealt with at the main ICO offices down in Wilmslow in Cheshire. And as you'll be aware, the ICO can wield a fairly big stick in terms of its powers if you get it wrong. And then up here in Scotland, we've got the Office of the Scottish Information Commissioner, and his focus is really on Freedom of Information Scotland Act and EIR issues. So starting off with the ICO and what they've said in relation to coronavirus, and the link on the slide there takes you to the Coronavirus Information Hub on their website, and there's a helpful what you need to know section where they summarise what they've said so far. In terms of the law, there have been no changes or relaxations, but for rights requests, the ICO has told requesters that they may experience understandable delays, and they've also said that they take into account the compelling public interest in the current health emergency. So I think we can be reassured that you're unlikely to face official sanctions if you make reasonable decisions to prioritise other tasks to protect and serve the rights of your tenants ahead of normal service levels or levels of service for data protection related issues such as responding to SARS within a month, etc. The ICO has clearly indicated that at the moment they're going to take a more sympathetic and lenient line. So the rules haven't changed, but I thought I'd just highlight a couple of key points about data breaches that you should remember. There's still the 72-hour deadline from the time the breach is reported to you for reporting it to the ICO if the breach is deemed to present a risk to the data subjects. You still need to inform the data subjects as soon as possible if there's likely to be a high risk to them so that they can take appropriate action to mitigate any damage. An obvious example there being if their bank details, for example, were compromised. And as importantly, you still need to do all that you can to minimise the impact on the data subjects of any breaches and also do what you can to prevent recurrences. On subject rights, the law still says you have to respond within a month, although the ICO has warned requesters to expect understandable delays. With your staff working from home, you may legitimately be able to claim that responding to the request has become complex, so you may decide to extend the time for response, and you can do that up to a maximum of 3 months. But you need to consider whether you do that on a case-by-case basis. You can't just make it a blanket policy, and my advice is to consult your DPO before you do decide to extend. As I said, extensions mustn't become the norm. You still need to aim to respond as soon as possible. And if you do decide to extend, you should record or document your reasons in case the ICO comes back to ask you why you made that particular decision. So document why you decided to delay, the reasons why the issue was complex, and list the practical challenges. And at the moment, obviously, that's going to be, it's harder to access documents, and the staff are obviously working from home, they're dispersed, so it's, they're more unavailable than they normally are. And also manage expectations, keep the requester informed, tell them why you're delaying the request so that they feel involved in the process. And finally, on data protection, and just a reminder about the data protection principles, which you still need to comply with. Arguably, these are even more important now that we're working from home, in particular, the last one for data controllers. You're still responsible for demonstrating compliance with the rest of the principles. And I'll come back to these when I talk about home working in a minute. Moving on to freedom of information and the Office of the Scottish Information Commissioner's guidance. There's the link there on the slide to their website, where he has a guidance section about the coronavirus bill in particular. The Scottish Government and the OSIC has gone further on freedom of information than the ICO has for the rest of the UK, in that they have actually changed one of the key timelines, albeit temporarily. On the 1st of April, the Scottish Parliament passed emergency legislation in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this slide and the next couple of slides are extracts from the bill. The key bits I've highlighted in yellow. And although you'll see that the timeline's been extended to a maximum of 60 days, you're still required to try and respond promptly. And note that the extension applies to both the initial FOI request, but also any subsequent review. And remember, if you do plan to refuse the request or apply charges, or you want to go back to seek clarification on what the question is, you shouldn't wait for the 60 days before responding promptly. You should go back as soon as you can. What's not shown on that slide is that there is also a mechanism in the bill for Scottish ministers to allow public authorities to extend the timescale by a further 40 working days, i.e. up to a total of 100 working days, where you determine that it's not reasonably practicable to respond to the request within the relevant period because either the volume and complexity of the information requested is too much, or you've had the overall number of requests that you've received is such that you can't deal with them in the time. I don't think, hopefully you're not going to need that extra bit of the bill, and it's quite contentious. The Scottish Information Commissioner has got his reservations about it, and if you were thinking of extending beyond the 60 days, please do consult your DPO and the Scottish Information Commissioner before you go down that route. Other provisions in the bill to note are that if you miss a deadline or fail to comply in any other way because of coronavirus, the Commissioner will be sympathetic in his decision, providing that he agrees that your failure was reasonable, which is fair enough. And finally, just note that these extra provisions or the extra timeline is out until the 30th of September at the moment. Hopefully they won't need to extend it beyond that. Note that the provisions of the bill don't extend to EIRs, Environmental Information Regulations. On EIRs, there are no change to the current rules and timelines, although the Commissioner has said that he's going to be sympathetic if a delay was reasonably deemed to be unavoidable due to COVID-19. And remember, in any case, with EIRs, it's easier to extend the deadline from 20 working days to 40 working days under the existing law. So moving on to home working, the UK and Scottish Government's advice is obviously to work from home wherever possible, and that seems to be set to continue for a bit longer at least. The purpose of this bit of the webinar is to give you some tips and advice on home working from the data protection perspective. There's a number of perspectives that you need to consider, not least IT security and also HR aspects, but I'm going to focus on the data protection side. The slide shows what the ICO has said, and in a nutshell, I think what this means is that you should have conducted some sort of risk assessment or data protection impact assessment to try and highlight the risks of home working and identify measures and procedures to mitigate them. Those risks that you've identified and the measures that you've identified to mitigate them should be included in your home working policy, and the policy should be explained to all staff so that you as the data controller, if necessary, can demonstrate accountability. It brings us back to the data protection principles, and I think there's no harm in including those principles in your home working policy as a reminder to staff. Obviously, they've all got to be complied with, but I think there are three which are particularly pertinent to staff working from home. The first one is adequate, relevant and limited to what is necessary, i.e. only hold what personal data you need and no more. Don't take loads of stuff home if you don't need it. Retained no longer than is necessary, i.e. get rid of the data as soon as you don't need it anymore. And then thirdly, processed in a manner which ensures appropriate security. So just think security at home for both hard copy data and electronic data. I mean, the bottom line is that during this COVID-19 period, with people working from home, the data protection rules and regulations haven't changed, but the risks are potentially greater, particularly in these early days, as we're all getting used to new systems and new ways of working away from the office. Hopefully you've probably already got a home working policy, but if not, there are numerous examples on the internet. Some of you, I think, certainly if you're with the EVH, will have seen an information note that they've pushed out on the subject. And if you need to, come to RGDP and we can provide you with a template if required. The next few slides list some of the specific data privacy measures that you might include in your home working policy. The main message of this is really just to try and get your staff to consider privacy and data security as a sort of mindset when setting up their home working space. So, for example, get into the habit of locking your screen, or if you're away for any length of time, log off. Look behind you in your workplace and see what's behind you. See what people might be looking at on your screen, and maybe have your back to the wall when you work. And if you're using video links or audio links, consider using headphones for conference calls. On this slide, by systems approved by the RSL, what I mean is devices and systems that the RSL has authorised staff to use, which may have personal data on them, for which the RSL is the data controller. And this is especially so if they're private devices, such as somebody's personal computer at home or their mobile phone or whatever. RSL should authorise what video conferencing systems might be used. There's a raft of them out there. Zoom and MS Teams seem to be the ones being used the most. But some of the other ones, which I'm not as familiar with because we don't use them, I am aware that there are more risks involved with them, especially around data sharing. So get your IT staff involved in considering what video conferencing systems you use, and consider the data protection privacy aspects. And on the third bullet, a while ago and prior to this crisis, one of our clients had quite a serious breach when a staff member used their own mobile phone to take a photo of a customer's personal data. He was planning to give it to his manager later that evening. It was to remind himself as to what the issue was about. But what he didn't realise was that his phone was set such that the photo was automatically downloaded onto a publicly available website, which created quite a bit of angst. So again, get the IT people involved and make sure that you do think about that sort of thing when working on your own personal devices. Hard copy documents, and here I am aware that some RSLs, some people from RSLs have taken tenant files home with them. Obviously, they need to be kept particularly secure once they're out of the office. Finally, when something does go wrong, do encourage your staff to tell you about it as soon as possible. Try to be grateful to them rather than being angry with them. And providing the issue can be linked to the current situation, the regulators are clearly going to be sympathetic about it. And ensure that staff do know who to go to if they think they've received a potential FOI request or a subject access request, because these can be sent to anybody. So that's it. It's not really rocket science, and I hope it didn't seem as though I was trying to teach you to suck eggs. Hopefully we've got some time now for questions, but if anybody wants to get in touch with me individually after the webinar, do feel free to email me or call me. Contact details are on the slide. But thank you for your time, and I'll now happily take questions.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. And so I see at the moment we haven't got any questions, but someone has made a comment about Zoom, which is very timeous as we're just about to start using Zoom for some other sessions. So thank you very much indeed. Just about using Zoom, check your settings before the call. Zoom bombs are on the rise. And actually there was something raised this morning about cyber attacks. is there any kind of good practice, Mark, that organisations should do around some of these web systems to make sure that if they are going to use them? I know we've heard talk of things like WhatsApp, things like that. Is there any good practice that they should be doing?
I think, I mean, some systems are more secure than others. MS Teams, I think, is one of the better ones, but I think you have to be on Office 365 to access that. Zoom, I know there was an issue about data sharing, but then I noticed that I think it was the cabinet are using it, and therefore I think it's okay. I think definitely you need to involve your IT staff, and I'm not an IT expert, and I'm not familiar with a lot of these systems, but involve the IT staff certainly. And I think when you're using these systems, I think try and sort of temper your conversations so that you avoid using personal data. So maybe if you're talking about obviously a subject access request, rather than talking about the specific individual by name, refer to them as the data subject. So I think there's sort of workarounds as well as the actual technical issues, which I'm not so familiar with. Does that help, Karen?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think we're all in kind of new territory, so absolutely. Oh, lovely. So there we are. We've got a new question, and a question from Alan too. So great. So Alan's asked, you mentioned a template policy. How could SFHA members gain access to this? And also Susie has asked, are you aware of particular security concerns around Zoom, and do you think they're valid, Mark?
The only one I've specifically seen about Zoom is to do with employees. If an employer makes their employees use Zoom, somewhere, I think it was on LinkedIn or Twitter or somewhere, somebody said that Zoom shares that Zoom users personal data with other organizations. And obviously, if the employer is making their employees use it and the employees' data ends up getting shared and they hadn't given consent or whatever, there can be some issues there. And actually, I mean, this article was saying that, actually employees will be able to sue their employer, etc., etc. I, to be honest, I don't know the technical details. But it seems like a potentially valid issue. But then on the other hand, an awful lot of renowned organizations, including the government, are using Zoom. So I suspect that again, the ICO will be sympathetic to that, but it may well be worth employers just, I don't know whether you ask your staff, you're happy to use Zoom or whatever, whether you sort of almost seek consent or not. But I think it's well worth maybe getting your IT people to dig into to what happens to some of the data on Zoom. And sorry, the first one was about the template. I think, yeah, I can provide the template. I can send it to you, Karen, and very happy for you to fire out to whoever wants it, or people can come to me direct, and I'll happily send it to them.
Oh, that's fantastic. We'll be able to share that along with the slides after the session. That's great. Okay. Let's see if there's any more questions have come in. Bear with me one moment. No, I think that's all the questions. What we will see is if anyone has something that they think of after the session, Mark, would you be quite happy for us to contact you by email, and then again we can share that?
Absolutely, yeah.
In fact, lovely.
Email and telephone numbers on the last slide, so that's fine.
Wonderful. We've got another question which has just come in, which is, do you have any advice on how we should be amending our privacy statements as a result of COVID-19?
Yes, I think it's well worth putting on your privacy statement if you can, that you may not be able to meet timelines for requests. You'll do your best to do so, but because of the complexity of home working, etc., you may well not be able to meet those. I think that's probably about the only one, actually, to be honest. I mean, otherwise, everything else on the privacy statement is probably still relevant, but you might just sort of warn people off about timelines. It's going to be maybe slightly more difficult. The employee one, you could include on your employee privacy statement something about using Zoom and things like that. Again, telling your employees that their data could potentially be more widely shared than is normal during this period. I mean, you stick it on your privacy statement, but obviously you need to tell your staff as well. Those are probably the main ones that I can think. I think the main one is timelines. Otherwise, the bottom line is that none of the other rules and regulations have changed, albeit the regulators are looking at things more sympathetically. But I think probably just that one for the employees and the wider one for the wider world, your website privacy notice, probably something about timelines. You'll do your best to meet them, but it may be more complex. You may have to extend.
And Mark, we've had another question come in, not linked directly to COVID-19. What do you think will be the implications of Morrison's winning their court case against the ICO?
I think it was the right decision. To be honest, I think if you have a rogue employee who does what the guy at Morrison's did, I think it would have been very harsh on Morrison's as the employer to have taken the rap for that. It's very difficult to do anything about it. So in terms of implications, I think. I think, thank goodness for I think the implications would have been much greater had the decision gone the other way. So actually, I don't think the implications of this are necessarily going to be huge. I think they would have been huge had the decision gone the other way. So I think that's probably the answer to that question. But I think employers should probably be heaving a bit of a sigh of relief that it did go that way. And one does wonder how it managed to get all the way to the Supreme Court, because I think most people thought that they were surprised that it had got that far. But there we go. Maybe because it was a test case.
And Mark, we've had another question in from Paul Murphy. We've had only one FOI request since November. So in your experience, are people using their rights?
Yes, and I think that they definitely are. Luckily, we haven't seen a complete deluge of requests, but I think there is a steady increase. I think, funnily enough, not so much with FOI. I think it's more on the data protection side. The rights requests seem to be gradually and steadily increasing, and it seems that almost now, if there's an HR issue, a complaint or a grievance or something like that, the subject access request almost seems to be, part of the standard procedure now that people do. They put their subject access request in. Less so on the FOI side so far. I think haven't seen such an increase there, but it's probably still early days. And I guess it might be worth just reminding everybody. I don't know whether the commissioner will give an extension, but we're now we've now completed the sort of the second quarterly period of stats reporting for OSIC, and I think by the 8th of May we're all supposed to have reported the quarterly statistics for the period January to March. So I expect the Commissioner will push out a reminder in due course, but whilst people are on, I'll just remind them about that. Start collating your stats for the next return.
And yeah, the latest question, we've been approached by a local authority to give details of vulnerable customers so the local resilience group can make contact and check welfare. Is this okay? That's a really tiniest question.
Yeah, that's the second time I've heard that. One of our customers had that question. The answer is yes, absolutely. In the current climate, it is the sort of right thing to do. The only advice I would give, I think, is just be absolutely sure that the question has come from who you think it's come from. So you need to go and just confirm the identity of the requester. And as long as it's an official authority and you're quite happy that that it sounds as though it's valid and kosher, it's absolutely fine to provide that information.
A couple of other questions, Mark. We've not had any new FOI requests since COVID escalated. More a statement than a question, so hoping levels drop off a little. Yeah. And someone's asked any advice on how to deal with a tenant who is looking to inundate the association with FOI requests. So what would be the best approach to dealing with this?
You've probably got to answer the first one, but then if it becomes very, very repetitive, in the end you can actually refuse to respond. They can, they can become vexatious, and if you believe they've become vexatious and you can demonstrate that they've become vexatious, again, you don't need to respond. But you do initially have to go through the motions of replying to the requests, almost to sort of prove that they've become vexatious. On repeated requests, if they're asking exactly the same question every time, and providing the question is exactly the same, you don't have to reply after a while. It's quite difficult, and it's probably worth taking some advice after you believe that it's become vexatious. Before you formally declare it's vexatious and refuse to request, it's probably worth going to the Commissioner and saying, look, we believe this is vexatious, and we honestly just don't believe it's worth replying to this. So you almost sort of go to the Commissioner yourself before they do. It's quite difficult. It's a judgment call, and the Commissioner will take a reasonable view of it. Hopefully that helps.
That's super, Mark. So I think if there's no other questions, I want to say thank you very much indeed, Mark, for speaking with us today and for leading this webinar for us. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's attended. Next steps are we will get the recording uploaded. We'll send you a link to that. We'll also send you a link to the slides. And Mark, you very kindly offered to share the template, and we'll be able to give people who've asked for that, we'll be able to send them that as well. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Have a good day. Keep safe. Oh, I've just seen another. Oh, there we are. Thanks, Gavin. Hi. Keep safe, and we're adding webinars on all the time. And so if there is anything in particular that you think that we should be covering, then please get in touch either with myself or Molly, or simply through the events at SFHA. So thank you very much indeed, everyone.